Good evening and welcome. Tonight I will be reading to you this history magazine article about the samurai. And this is called The Decline of the Warrior Caste. So the late stage samurai, pretty much after the Warring States period. This article, though, was chosen by my channel members. It was chosen by Robot Canary, Veer, and Craig. Thank you so much for picking this article. And if you would like to choose a future history magazine article, you can join my channel memberships by clicking the join button right down there, or the very first link in the description box down there as well. My channel memberships are only 99 cents a month, and you get all kinds of perks like early access to all of my videos. You get your name in every video. Right now it's a little special because today's December 1st and Vlogmas starts today. So if you want to see what my life is like during Christmas time, see my advent calendar and all of that, that's on my channel memberships. Also, there's going to be trivia this Thursday, and channel members get to pick the topics. So, now's a good time to join. Not to mention, I should be getting a new issue of History Magazine in about a week, which means in about a week, there will be a new list of topics to choose from. So, now is really the best time to join my channel memberships. So, I would be very appreciative if you did that. And see all the fun that exists behind that little paywall there. The least amount of pay that I could set it to. If I could make it 50 cents, I could, but I can only set it to as low as 99 cents. But with that being said, let's read about the samurai. The decline of the warrior caste. It says, for the samurai, the stability and centralization of the Tokugawa shogunate eventually led to the loss of their role. With no masters to serve, the samurai became poets, monks, swordsmen, and gangsters. So let's learn some facts about the samurai you didn't know, because this is it says, after the Warring States period, after the golden age of samurai. What did they do when that era was over? Let's find out. The samurai, Japan's celebrated lineage of warriors, emerged in the Heian period, which was between 794 and 1185, when the rise of their status enabled them to mingle with the refined nobility living in the then capital of Heian-kyo. Today it's called Kyoto. Samurai fought in the Onin War and during the period of unrest that followed. From then on, the Bushi, as the samurai were also called, made their mark on Japanese history with their exceptional fighting prowess, becoming emblematic of Japanese culture. The high point of samurai history is often associated with the Tokugawa shogunate, also known as the Edo period, which existed between 1603 and 1868. A time of peace, prosperity, isolationist policies, and cultural growth. This is the most studied era of Japanese history, and the period in which novelists, filmmakers, and comic book creators tend to place their samurai characters. However, far from being the zenith of samurai culture, this period marked the beginning of the end of the samurai, or at least as the warrior caste they'd been during the previous centuries. Adapting to peace. Once the Tokugawa regime was established after the conquest of Osaka Castle, right here, in 1615, Japan enjoyed a period of peace, disturbed only by a few peasant revolts. The last major insurrection was the Shimabara Rebellion between 1637 and 1638, which originated in a village on the island of Kyushu in the southwest of the archipelago. It was sparked by excessive taxation and the persecution of Japanese converts to Christianity. The leader of the uprising, Amakusashiro, perfectly exemplified the paradoxes of this new era. He was a Christian samurai capable of bringing together the warlike bearing of the Bushi with the ideals of salvation transmitted by the Jesuit evangelists who'd arrived in Japan in the 16th century. The uprising was brutally put down by government troops, with the help of cannons provided by Dutch merchants who'd settled in the archipelago. With the revolt crushed, Iemitsu, the third Tokugawa shogun, decided to slam shut the gates of the country to all foreign influence. I'm going to read with this hand for a bit. This hand's kind of cramping up. And impose a self-isolating, draconian policy of control, the sakoku. Iemitsu's measures guaranteed more than 2 centuries without war in Japan. The downside was that the samurai were rendered obsolete. Tens, even hundreds of thousands of samurai, whose forebears had been waging war for centuries, suddenly had to find new ways to survive outside the army. Even in this new context, there were samurai who continued to demonstrate their swordsmanship in duels and exhibitions. The most famous of these was undoubtedly Miyamoto Musashi. Scholars are divided over whether or not he, as a teenager, participated in the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600, one of the last major conflicts before the Tokugawa shogunate. In any case, Miyamoto was left without a lord to serve, and devoted himself to developing his own technique of combat with 2 swords, the wakizashi, the short sword, and the katana, the long sword. He showed off his skill in nearly 70 duels, all of them ending in victory for him, and many with the death of his opponent. Before he died, Miyamoto wrote a martial arts treatise that is well known today, Gorin no Sho, the Book of 5 Rings. Swordsman. In the mid-17th century, duels were banned, and the use of swords was allowed only in self-defense. Faced with this restriction, the samurai resorted to provocations and insults so that their opponents would attack first. A samurai could then be justified in defending himself. Many samurai perfected the technique of iaijutsu, unsheathing their katanas at lightning speed before the opponent was able to land a blow. Iaijutsu derived from the martial art kenjutsu, but soon became more popular. The samurai created a large number of dojos, or martial arts schools, in which an aesthetic style of combat developed. The dramatic change in the status of the samurai was reflected in the emergence of the ronin. This was the name given to samurai who were left without a master. The Japanese word ronin means men of the waves and evokes an aimless wandering and a sense of being untethered, like floating leaves on the water. A romantic idea of the Japanese warrior par excellence soon grew around the figure of the ronin. They were seen as mavericks who could perform all kinds of feats. This ideal was best embodied in the figure of Miyamoto Musashi. However, Miyamoto was an exception. In reality, most ronin tended to be sword-wielding vagabonds, their need to survive forcing them to accept unglamorous jobs such as bodyguards, enforcers, or simply laborers. What are my cats doing? Did you hear that? Oh, they are both trying to get into the same bed. It's really cute. There we go. Yeah, you can't sit on his head. Yeah, okay. They're going to figure themselves out in the corner. It's super cute, but we're reading about the ronin right now. So if you hear little kitties rolling around, that's what's happening. Edo thrives. Meanwhile, in the city of Edo, which today is Tokyo, everything seemed to be flourishing. Businesses and services grew year over year, creating a rich and populous city that impressed the few foreign visitors who came to Japan. One got kicked out. Among these was the German physician and naturalist Engelbert Kaempfer, who claimed in the late 17th century that Edo was the center of the world. The city's prosperity was largely because of a law that required feudal lords to live in Edo for 6 months of the year, maintaining their entire court of samurai and other servants there. Many ronin also flocked to Edo. Some of them founded organized gangs that operated on the margins, practicing extortion and running prostitution rings. Over decades, these groups adopted increasingly complex codes and hierarchies based on a distorted vision of Bushido, the samurai code. This gave rise to what would later become known as the Yakuza, Japanese mafia. Made up of families comparable to samurai clans. The weapons, tattoos, and clothing of its members made the Yakuza immediately recognizable and instilled fear among the common people. This was analogous to the way the Bushi had identified themselves by carrying the daisho, or traditional pair of swords comprising a long-bladed katana and short-bladed wakizashi, and displaying their family crest or kamon. Yakuza members would amputate sections of their own fingers in an imitation of harakiri, suicide by disembowelment, as an honorable punishment if they ever made a mistake. Precarious economic situation. The samurai who did manage to remain in the service of a daimyo, or feudal lord, had to accompany him during the annual season he was obliged to spend in the capital. There, they received a minimal stipend in exchange for sporadic administrative or surveillance work on the master's estate. Since the code of their class prohibited them from making investments or engaging in any commercial activity, the economic situation of these samurai was often precarious. It wasn't uncommon for them to spend the day drinking in taverns and hiring prostitutes in Yoshiwara, Edo's pleasure district. They often ended up in debt to members of the city's emerging merchant bourgeoisie. Many samurai of ancient lineage even sold their katanas to pay for the mizuage, or deflowering, of a maiko, or apprentice geisha, a ceremony that was in fashion at the time. But not all samurai fell into this kind of debauchery. There was also those who became notable personalities in the world of the arts. A case in point is that of Matsuo Basho, one of the greatest haiku poets in Japanese history. And pretty much if you've read an ancient haiku, it was most likely Basho. Like a 90% chance. He was the son of Matsuo Yosemon, who had belonged to an old samurai family. As a young man, Basho began to serve the firstborn of the Todo clan, but his literary talent enabled him to distance himself from the military field. In the realm of painting, Watanabe Kazan, whose family was loyal to the daimyo Tahara, combined the traditional Japanese painting style ukiyo-e with European style realism and shading, or namban. Almost equally subversive in technique was the artist Kawanabe Kyosai, considered one of the fathers of manga. Officials and bureaucrats. Some samurai rose to positions of power in the courts of the Tokugawa shoguns, not as warriors, but as ministers and bureaucrats. This was the case of Kira Yoshinaka, who became a koke, a master of ceremonies managing high-level events. Daimyo Asano Naganori assaulted Kira during a disagreement and was then forced to die by seppuku, also known as harakiri, as punishment. This led to the infamous vendetta waged by the 47 samurai. After Asano's suicide, the samurai who'd been in his service converted into ronin, then waited more than a year for the best moment to assassinate Kira and avenge their master. They were then condemned to commit harakiri. Paradoxical as it may seem, the triumph of the most important samurai in the history of Japan, Shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu, marked the beginning of the decline of his own caste. The Bushi Code lost much of the meaning it had in earlier times, while an idealized image of the samurai emerged, describing a phenomenon that had never existed. In the 19th century, as Japan felt its integrity threatened by the English, Russians, and Americans, there was an attempt to shake off the old-fashioned, purist ideology of the warrior, and instead mix it with one of nationalism in the service of the emperor. Today, something of the samurai essence remains in Japan, whether in the militaristic tradition, in the activity of the yakuza, or in deeply rooted values such as discipline and artistic sensibility. Now let's read about Hagakure. That's the rest on there. Okay, Hagakure. Nostalgia for the old ways of the samurai. The Hagakure is an 18th century compilation of the reflections of Yamamoto Tsunetomo, a high-ranking samurai official. The collection, later translated into English, is a kind of handbook and ethical code of the samurai at a time when its warrior values were no longer seen as relevant. Having pursued a career as a scholar, a warrior, and a librarian, Yamamoto became a Buddhist priest and retired to the woods, where he noted the thoughts that were later compiled into his masterpiece. Evocative of his woodland surroundings, Hagakure is translated either as In the Shade of the Leaves or Fallen Leaves. It recalls with nostalgia a time when samurai were true warriors, willing to die at any moment. He writes extensively on how to approach death, show obedience to one's master, and be serene in adversity. A few examples of the many amorphisms are included in the following translation of Hagakure by William Scott Wilson. The original work also criticizes young samurai for abandoning the old ways. The emphasis on devotion and bravery follow the ideals of the old Bushi, a far cry from modern samurai, whose role lacked the same need for discipline. So let's read some quotes from this book. First segment's titled, Obey the Master. If one were to say in a word what the condition of being a samurai is, its basis lies first in seriously devoting one's body and soul to his master. And if one is asked what to do beyond this, it should be to fit oneself inwardly with wisdom, humanity, and courage. Intelligence is nothing more than discussing things with others. Limitless wisdom comes from this. Humanity is something done for the sake of others, simply comparing oneself with them and putting them in the fore. Courage is gritting one's teeth. be prepared to die. This is the essence of the way of the samurai. You must die anew every morning and every night. If you continually preserve the state of death in everyday life, you will understand the essence of Bushido, and you will gain freedom in the way. Your whole life will be without blame, and you will succeed in your calling. Wow. Embrace adversity. When meeting calamities or difficult situations, it is not enough to simply say that one is not at all flustered. When meeting difficult situations, one should dash forward bravely and with joy. It is the crossing of a single barrier, and is like the saying, the more the water, the higher the boat. And then the youth of today, those pesky kids. During the last 30 years, customs have changed. Now, when young samurai get together, if there is not just talk about money matters, loss and gain, secrets, clothing styles, or matters of sex, there is no reason to gather together at all. Customs are going to pieces. Every generation ages and blames the younger one for being just awful, don't they? Every single time. All throughout history, those darn pesky kids. So this is a beautiful photograph of a samurai. It was taken by Felice Beato in 1864. This photo is in the Met in New York. And this is an absolutely beautiful woodcut of a samurai from the 19th century. Isn't that fantastic? All the colors and shapes. Oh, that is so cool. All the details. This gaze. This is located in the Library of Decorative Arts in Paris. Let's read about Basho, from samurai to poet. The family of Matsuo Basho, the most famous poet of the Edo era, were samurai. I didn't know that. Did you know that? I didn't know that. But he had a simple peasant lifestyle growing up in the domain of the Todo clan, owners of Iga Castle, between the ancient capitals of Nara and Kyoto. At an early age, Matsuo began serving the master of the castle, which gave him the opportunity to take up poetry. After the death of his master, Basho moved to Edo, where he made a name for himself as a poet, working particularly in the genre of the haikai, which under his influence evolved into haiku. This poetic form comprises 3 lines, the first and last lines having 5 syllables, and the middle line 7 syllables. Through this precise format, Basho sought to capture moments of nature. The haiku, then known as a haikai, had been seen as a popular amusement, but Basho instilled it in a meditative power. An old pond a frog jumps into, the sound of water. Matsuo left Edo to settle in a cottage in the countryside. During those years, he also made various trips around Japan, which inspired many of his most celebrated haiku. So this is a segment from his Kashima journal. It says, I resolved to see the moon over the mountains of Kashima Shrine this autumn. I was accompanied by 2 men, a masterless samurai and an itinerant monk. The monk was dressed in robes as black as a crow. Off he strutted, thumping his staff, alone in the universe. I, however, am neither a monk nor a man of the world. I could be called a bat, in between a bird and a mouse. Wow. So here's a beautiful, beautiful work of art here, showing Basho right here. It says, conversing with 2 roadside drinkers in this 19th century print in ukiyo-e style, which depicts subjects from everyday life. He does look like a wise old poet, almost like a little traveling wise wizard with the staff and hat. I wonder what they're talking about. What could these drunk guys be saying to a wise traveling poet, I wonder? Now, this is showing that really distressing tradition with the samurai here taking a Maiko who looks very young here. Goodness. And you know what happens after that. And there's some musicians over here playing their instruments. This is a woodcut from the 19th century by Hishikawa Morinobu. Now this is a really beautiful piece here. It looks like a Where's Waldo picture. There's so much happening, all these little tiny details. It says, the mood of Edo at night is captured in this 19th century painting. And this is at the Museo d'Arte Orientale, Edoardo Chiosone in Genoa, Italy. Let's see what's happening here. It looks like maybe a restaurant here and they're drinking upstairs. There's some illicit activities happening here with this woman and these three naked men. You can see they're offering some women offering to come inside and some shady men entering. A lot of these people aren't wearing pants. He's really covering himself up there. They're just, you know, Winnie the Pooh in it right now. But at least their shirts are long. There's something happening over here at the bar. It looks like there's a little fight happening. Like there's so much going on here. They're selling like potatoes or something down here. This couple's having an argument. There's dogs running around. This lady's looking out the window with her fan, gazing out into the night. There's a lot going on. And then over here we can see a Yakuza. He's covered in tattoos. You can see all over his back. He's very vicious. Don't mess with that guy. Here's a gorgeous photograph. There we go. It says a daimyo, or feudal lord or land-holding master, accompanied by his warriors, is about to set off for Edo, which is Tokyo, in a norimono, or palanquin. The photograph was taken around 1867, just before the Meiji Restoration, which would end the feudal Tokugawa shogunate and force the westernization of Japanese society. So what an important photograph from a time long gone, right before times like this would be abolished in a way, in favors of modernization. So yeah, he's about to step into his little carriage here, and these guys are ready to pick this up and carry him around. This is probably a samurai right here. Isn't that incredible? It's weird that, like, this is a photograph, right? Time long ago. I hope you can't hear the static that my mic is picking up right now. I hate when that happens. But yeah, look at the old lanterns. It's really beautiful. And it's really neatly colorized as well. Still sepia, but you can see the blue in his robes. And like the green and red of this samurai outfit here. Really incredible. Here is some art of some ronin. It says these 19th century illustrations show ronin, or masterless wandering samurai, armed with a spear or yari and a daisho, and a pair of short and long swords. You can see their swords here at their hip, and their long spears. And it looks like this guy's fending off some arrows being shot at him. Hitting them out of the air. Looks like this guy is like taunting someone. And their clothes are also remarkable. It's probably very heavy to wear all of this material and armor. But I bet you they carried it like it weighed nothing, right? This is beautiful Osaka Castle. Built in the 16th century, this fortress was the main stronghold of the Toyotomi clan, which maintained its resistance against the armies of Tokugawa Ieyasu. The capture of the castle in 1615 led to the unification of Japan under the Tokugawa shogunate. Osaka Castle is very important in that I believe it was like every castle was destroyed during World War II except Osaka Castle. I know this one is preserved. might be another castle or two that, maybe Himeji Castle, but I'm pretty sure that one was rebuilt. All the castles you see in Japan today have been rebuilt exactly as they were. But Osaka Castle is the genuine article. It was not bombed during World War II. It's down here. It's a guard from a hilt of a Japanese katana sword from the late 18th century. Wow. And then we have this gorgeous painting here of like what I feel like when we think of samurai, we think of this style of armor with the big helmets and the shoulder helmets there, the chest piece, the swords on top of a horse. I don't know, that's what I think of, that Akira Kurosawa kind of image there, the warriors there, the samurai. It says this 19th century illustration depicts the legendary samurai Honda Tadakatsu on horseback after his victory in the Battle of Mount Komaki in 1584. Tadakatsu was one of Tokugawa Ieyasu's main collaborators in his fight for the shogunate. Wow. Really beautiful. So that is it for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. I'm going to have History Magazine articles for the rest of this month. So if you enjoyed this, be sure to subscribe so you won't miss out. And if you want to choose future History Magazine articles, you can click the join button right down there and become a channel member. I hope that you found this to be relaxing and educational. Let me know what cool facts you learned in this article. And I hope that you have a good